Today, my Journalism Award of Excellence goes to Fareed Zakaria. He did a piece describing Joe Biden's presidency like no other. And what is sad about it is, as we are in this campaign where Kamala Harris is running against Donald Trump, and the surrogates from Donald Trump are trying to tell Americans the bad state of the economy, the bad state of the Biden presidency, when they are trying to push that message, when the message is completely opposite to America's reality, it presents a problem. And journalists have not been doing their job in allowing a false balance, as our good friend Matthew Dowd had tweeted about recently. So let's take a listen to Fareed Zakaria, and then we'll take it on the other side. There are a couple of things that I disagree with, and it has more to do with the indoctrination of every single or the vast majority of Americans that we need to dispel. Let's listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
It's too early to write up the legacy of Joe Biden. The signature aspect of Biden's presidency has been his big break from decades of economic policy. For almost half a century, the federal government has refrained from any transformative long-term investments in the American economy. Even the large COVID payments were for consumption, not for investment. In fact, the defining fiscal policies of our times have been tax cuts. President Reagan, Bush, and Trump all enacted large tax cuts that broadly benefited the rich. The result has been an America that can be characterized by private opulence and public decay. $100 million homes in a country where the roads are scarred by potholes and children die at higher rates than any other country in the industrialized world. These tax cuts, by the way, along with spending on wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, are responsible for much of America's enormous federal debt. Biden changed this narrative. He used the resources of the federal government to make large investments in infrastructure, childcare, manufacturing, and energy. These investments will not pay off anytime soon. Many of them have just begun. But the U.S. is now undergoing the largest upgrade of its transportation infrastructure since the 1950s, with more than 56,000 projects already launched. It is seeing a boom in manufacturing investment and employment that reverses a decades-long trend. Green energy is booming. And for the year that it was in effect, Biden's expanded child tax credit helped reduce child poverty in America by 46%, moving a staggering 3.4 million children out of poverty in 1 year. The credit expired after a year, and congressional Republicans refused to renew it. Biden's measures helped trigger the strongest post-COVID recovery of any major economy. The U.S. has produced over 15 million jobs, the most ever for any president in one term. The unemployment rate stayed under 4% for over 2 years. That's the longest since the 1960s. Black labor force participation rates are now higher than of whites for the first time ever on a sustained basis, and so on. It's true that inflation surged, and while the pandemic played a role, so did an excessive infusion of cash into the economy, for which Biden must be held responsible. Overall, as former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg TV, the record is remarkable. Summers added, "I don't think any administration has so outperformed economic forecasts on the day that it came into office." Biden gets almost no credit for this economic revival. Some of that is the lingering effect of inflation and the persisting crisis of affordability in areas like healthcare, housing, and higher education. But much of it, as I have long argued, is that we live in an age of cultural politics. The issue on which Republicans have been attacking him mostly is not the economy, but the border. The administration has strengthened America's alliance system in the Indo-Pacific. It has built new structures of cooperation and deterrence with Japan, South Korea, India, Australia, and others. All in all, it has handled the world well enough that surveys suggest that most countries rate the United States and Joe Biden much more favorably than they did under Donald Trump. The final legacy of Biden is that he has returned the presidency to an office of sanity, decency, and dignity, ushering out the dangerous demagoguery, anti-democratic rhetoric, and behavior that preceded him. But for that legacy to endure, and for Biden's term not to simply be a moment in time, he needed to ensure that the United States actually closes the chapter on Donald Trump. And to help make this more likely, he made the painful decision not to run for the presidency, which will also earn him a special place in the history books. Joe Biden has felt that he has been underestimated all his life. Judging by his tenure in the White House, he's right.
Fareed nailed it. He nailed it about the economy. He nailed it about job participation. He nailed it about all these things that are the realities, right? But where he failed, the one part that he failed is when he made the statement that Biden has to take responsibility for the influx of monies into the economy that caused inflation. And where he's wrong in that respect is the following. The good that he spoke about, the reduction in poverty rate, we not going into a recession, the expansion in employment, all of that was caused by the influx of money into the economy. Absent the influx of money, those realities that he praises doesn't occur. That's why many times I speak about the engineering mind, causal and effect, and all these types of issues that folks need to take into account. Let's now define what caused inflation. Inflation, if you listen to the purity of economics, which we've never had, capitalism isn't a purity of economics. Capitalism is a fraud that actually maximizes profits for the few. And also it has no soul. It generates what we call cannibalism. In other words, as Milton Friedman, the god of capitalism, would say, don't worry about environment. Don't worry about people. Your sole responsibility is the maximization of profits for the shareholder and the bonuses for the executive. That's all that matters in capitalism. Now, what Fareed did is he kind of bought into that idea when he attempts to say that inflation has something to do with Biden's policy. The reality is inflation was a choice by corporate America. And how do we know it's a choice by corporate America? Inflation is normally in a pure economic system caused by a shortage of product, a shortage of services. We can blame the pandemic for a short while for saying it created a supply chain problem, which means bringing products from China, bringing products from Vietnam, bringing products from everywhere into America had a blockage that created shortages, and for that prices went up. But then again, the blame for those supply chain issues isn't, again, the pandemic specifically. It is the short thinking, poor thinking corporate executive who, in order to maximize profits, stiffed the American people to manufacture overseas. And when the problems of supply come in, they still maintain their profit levels by stiffen the Americans again and charging them more. Inflation is not a government cause issue when there isn't a supply problem. Remember when oil prices went up? Oil prices went up not because we had a shortage of petroleum, not because of the Ukraine war. And you know how we know that? Because even as we had the Ukraine war, Saudi Arabia decided that they were going to take 2 million barrels of oil per day off of the market simply to keep prices high. What is that called? Inflation. All right. Inflation was not caused by Biden's policies. Inflation was caused by corporate policies, and it is reflected in their economic statements that prove their profit went up proportional to the inflation rate and higher. These are statements of facts that are verifiable. So Biden is not to blame for inflation. Put in money. What if you were to accept that? It would say that Americans will never get a chance to go ahead, because as you put more monies into their pockets, the corporations, instead of saying, let's charge a fair price for our product and people can save their money for the future, they will say, we will do, and this is what is said in capitalism, whatever the market will bear. So if they have an extra $10 in their pocket, that gives the capitalist a reason to increase milk so that they can take away some money that these people already have in their pockets. Understand this, and we have to get away from the indoctrination. But as far as given the status of what Biden has accomplished, Fareed Zakaria did an excellent job. Sand that issue with inflation. And with respect to the border, he also says that is one of the issues, inflation and border, that Kamala Harris is going to have to take into account when talking about Biden's policies. Again, that has its genesis in U.S. policy for decades, starting before Clinton, even though Clinton was also partially responsible for a lot of that that large immigration from Haiti, because again, the rice policies, NAFTA, all these issues have, even though it may be beneficial for corporate America, it's the stuff that hurt workers not only in the United States of America, but all throughout Latin, South America, and around the world. So again, kudos, award to Fareed Zakaria for getting it mostly right.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.